Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in some incredibly important and, complex history. We've got a stack of source material here, drawn specifically from William L. Shirer's absolutely monumental work, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
That's right. And Shirer, well, he spent years as a correspondent in Nazi Germany, so his book, particularly these early sections we're looking at, offers a unique vantage point, you know, on how the regime really took root.
So our mission in this deep dive is what? To really unpack what these pages reveal.
Exactly. About the very beginnings of this state and the man who built it, we're pulling out the most crucial insights and, frankly, some surprising details you might not get in a standard history overview.
Right. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe.
Yeah.
To understanding the foundation of one of the most significant periods in modern history, seen through the eyes of someone who was actually there, and then meticulously documented it all.
Yeah.
We're going to navigate the origins of Hitler himself, the early struggles of the Nazi Party, those crucial gambles that paid off for him, and some of the chilling precursors to the horrors that followed. So let's dive right into the source. Okay, Shirer starts us off with a glimpse into the family life of Alois Hitler, Adolf's father. And it's presented as, well, rather complicated.
Complicated is a good word. Multiple marriages, children from different wives. Shirer mentions Alois Jr. and Angela from the marriage to Franziska.
And the second marriage was quite brief.
Yeah, cut short by tuberculosis, Shirer notes. And what's striking about the third marriage to Clara Polsel, Adolf's mother, is the age gap. She was 25, he was 48.
Wow.
And not just that, they were actually second cousins. They needed a special dispensation from the church to even get married.
Huh. Kind of an unconventional start for someone who'd later push such rigid ideas of conformity, isn't it?
It really is. It's one of those details Shirer includes that makes you pause.
Okay, so moving into young Adolf Hitler's years, approaching manhood. Shirer focuses on this period, and this is where it gets, well, really interesting and kind of bizarre, frankly.
Yeah.
What made these years happy for him, according to Shirer? It wasn't school or anything like that.
No. Oh, no. The source is quite specific. It was freedom. Freedom from having to work.
Right.
And this gave him vast amounts of time to brood, apparently, to dream wildly, and to just roam the streets and countryside with his friend Kubitschek.
Declaiming his thoughts, right? Shirer mentions that.
Yeah, dramatically declaiming his ideas about the world. And Shirer includes this fascinating description from Kubitschek, that friend.
What did he say?
Well, physically, he described him as pale, sickly, kind of lanky, but also shy, yet capable of these sudden, almost hysterical bursts of anger if anyone disagreed with him.
An early sign, maybe, of that temper and intolerance.
Seems like it. A definite hint. And then there's that completely strange 4-year fantasy love affair with a young woman named Stephanie.
The one he never actually spoke to.
Never once approached her, according to Shirer. He preferred keeping her entirely in his imagination. He even wrote her poems, love poems, one called Hymn to the Beloved.
And pictured her as the character from Wagner.
Exactly. As a damsel from Divalkur, riding a white steed. It's a vivid detail, isn't it? It shows this detached, almost theatrical way of relating to people, all inside his own head.
Absolutely bizarre. Okay, so with that strange background, let's set the scene for his move to Vienna in 1909. Shirer paints this picture of the city. Big, industrial, prosperous for some.
But also marked by significant poverty, a city of contrasts. 2 million people.
And the political climate. Shirer mentions that too.
Oh, yeah. Lower middle class controlling city politics, labor heavily organized by the Social Democrats. The whole city life was just a ferment of ideas, movements.
And this is a crucial period because, as Shirer points out, there was opportunity there for young men like him. His friend Kubitschek, for example, was making a go of it at the Academy of Music.
He was. Opportunity existed. But young Adolf, well, he took a very different path.
He didn't pursue architecture, even though he maybe had some talent.
Right. Shirer mentions the possibility of getting in with special talent admission, even without the full diploma. But no, he didn't follow through. And he wasn't interested in learning a trade or getting, a regular, steady job either.
Just those odd jobs.
Exactly. Shoveling snow, beating carpets, carrying bags at the station. He tried being a building laborer, but Shirer says that only lasted a few days.
So this lack of direction, it led downwards.
Pretty steeply, yeah. Abandoned his furnished room in 1909, spent 4 years living in flop houses, the men's hostel at Meldemannstrasse, relying on charity soup kitchens. Shirer really emphasizes this period. He says it profoundly shaped him more than anything else.
And Vienna is where he picks up the political ideas that stick.
Definitely. Shirer points to two main parties that caught his attention: Georg Ritter von Schoner's Pan-German Nationalist Party.
And the Social Democrats.
And the Social Democrats, yes. But it was the Pan-Germans he really latched onto. He called Schoner a profound thinker.
And adopted his whole program. The nationalism, anti-Semitism.
All of it. Violent nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-socialism, union with Germany, hating the Habsburgs and the Catholic Church. It was all there.
But Shirer highlights something else here, doesn't he? A sign of his political shrewdness.
Yes, and this is crucial. He didn't just swallow the ideology whole. He coldly analyzed why the Pan-Germans were failing as a political movement. He was already thinking tactically.
Assessing what worked and what didn't, even back then.
Exactly. A key insight into his pragmatic, sometimes ruthless approach to politics that, would really serve him later on.
Okay, so let's fast forward a bit. How does this ambition, this shrewdness, play out when he actually gets involved in the early Nazi party, the NSDAP? Shirer points to a really revealing internal conflict right at the start.
Oh, incredibly telling. The party's own founder, Anton Drexler, along with others on the committee, they actually drew up an indictment against Hitler.
An indictment. From his own party.
From the people who knew him best at the time, Shirer calls it the most drastic accusation made by those with first-hand knowledge of his character.
And what did it say? Shirer quotes some phrases.
Damning stuff. A lust for power and personal ambition, using the party as a springboard for his own immoral purposes, trying to seize leadership to force the party onto a different track.
And demanding dictatorship.
His ultimatum, according to Drexler, demanded sole and absolute dictatorship of the party, right from the beginning.
Wow. So this wasn't just about ideology, it was pure power struggle.
Absolutely. And Shirer connects this to later power struggles, too. He describes a meeting where figures like the Strasser brothers and Joseph Goebbels were pushing for more socialist ideas, like nationalizing industries.
Which Hitler opposed at that point.
He did. In his response, he sent Gottfried Feder, one of his loyalists, to basically shut down the rebels.
And Goebbels blew up.
Apparently so, demanding Feder be thrown out, shouting, "We don't want any stool pigeons." You can almost picture it.
So who actually backed Hitler in that fight?
According to Shirer, only Robert Ley, described as an alcoholic chemist, and the Cologne leader and Feder himself.
And then that amazing quote from Goebbels.
Yeah, the man who'd become his chief propagandist, shouting, "I demand that the petty bourgeois Adolf Hitler be expelled from the Nazi party."
Incredible. It just shows the resistance he faced, even from future allies, and how forcefully he dominated the party early on.
It really underscores his determination to bend it to his will. No compromise.
Now, switching gears slightly, but from around the same period, Shirer mentions this relationship with Jayli Robal, his niece. He calls it a mystery.
A mystery, yeah. A passionate connection, seemingly, that stood out in his otherwise quite detached personal life.
And there's that story about a compromising letter.
Yes, a chilling detail. A letter from Hitler to Gelli, apparently quite revealing. Shirer describes how it was retrieved from a landlord's son by Father Bernhard Stempfel.
The anti-Semitic journalist who helped with Mein Kampf.
The very same. And the party treasurer, Schwartz, paid to get it back.
And Shirer implies Stempfel didn't keep quiet about it.
He suggests Stempfel later paid with his life for that knowledge. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the ruthlessness, the protection of secrets, even back then.
Adds another dark layer, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Speaking of Schwartz and party money, how did the movement and Hitler personally manage financially in those early years? Shirer gives some insights, right? From tax returns.
He does. Details royalties from Mein Kampf, gives the figures for 1925 to 29, and notes that since the publisher's books were inspected, Hitler couldn't really underreport that income.
But other income from, say, writing articles.
That, Shirer states explicitly, was never reported on his tax returns. He demanded high fees for articles in the Nazi press, apparently caused grumbling about the high cost of Hitler.
Conveniently off the books.
Seems so. And then, as the late 20s rolled around, bigger money started coming in. From industrialists.
People drawn to his anti-Marxist stance.
Exactly. Anti-Marxist, anti-trade union. Shirer names Fritz Thyssen, the steel magnate, and Emil Kurdorf from Kohl as key early backers.
And how was that money handled?
This is a key point Shirer makes. It was often handed over directly to Hitler, personally.
Not necessarily to the party treasury.
Not always. How much he kept is unknown, but Shirer suggests his lifestyle, leading up to becoming chancellor, indicated not all of it went into the official party funds.
So, potential self-enrichment alongside funding the movement.
It points strongly in that direction. Control over the finances, personal and party, seemed blurred.
Okay, Shirer then shifts to the political chaos of the Weimar Republic in the early 1930s. This is the crucial backdrop, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. Governments were collapsing. Shirer mentions Chancellor Hermann Mueller, a social democrat, resigning over a dispute about unemployment insurance. Just one example of the instability.
And he was replaced by Heinrich Brüning.
Yes, from the Catholic Center Party. Shirer calls him the army's candidate, pushed forward by General von Schleicher, whom Shirer describes as an able but unscrupulous intriguer.
But Brüning himself, Shirer sees him as well-meaning.
He does. Honest, dedicated, trying desperately to save the Republic, restore stable government. But his tragedy, according to Shirer, was that in trying to save democracy, he actually unintentionally dug its grave.
How so?
Well, Shirer points to the fundamental problem. Too many parties in the Reichstag, 10, with over 1 million votes in 1930 alone, all pulling in different directions, focused on special interests.
Cattle trading politics, he calls it.
Exactly, making a stable majority impossible. So Brüning had to rely more and more on Article 48.
Governing by emergency decree.
Yes, with President Hindenburg's approval, which, normalized ruling without the parliament. It weakened the democratic institutions.
And Shirer links this back to Hitler's mindset.
Right, Hitler wasn't just watching this chaos, he was analyzing it. He saw the suffering, the economic despair, not with sympathy, but as a political opportunity, transforming it cold-bloodedly into support for himself.
We see this maneuvering with the Harzburg Front in '31, that meeting of conservatives.
Yeah, Hugenberg, the Stahlhelm paramilitary guys, agrarian leagues, old generals, all supposedly united against the government.
But Hitler wasn't really invested.
Not at all. Shirer says he despised these frock-coated, top-hatted, bemedaled relics. He saw associating too closely could be dangerous, dilute his image. So he gave a speech, made his presence felt, and got out quickly.
Calculated, use them, but don't be used by them.
Precisely. Shirer says his calculation was clear. Maybe tap them for new funding, but absolutely no way was he going to be their tool. The front basically fizzled out because Hitler wasn't truly committed.
And his maneuvering continued. Like when Brüning wanted to extend Hindenburg's term.
Yeah, instead of dealing with Brüning, Hitler went straight over his head, wrote directly to Hindenburg.
Called Brüning's plan unconstitutional, but offered a deal.
Exactly. Offered to support Hindenburg's re-election if Hindenburg first ditched Brüning's plan. Classic Hitler power play.
Which led to that secret meeting Shirer describes, with Meisner, Hindenburg's state secretary.
At the Kaiserhof Hotel, yeah. And Shirer details Hitler's direct demands. Get rid of Brüning, appoint a national government, meaning one including Nazis, and decree new elections. In return, Hitler would back Hindenburg.
It's just so direct, so strategic, going right to the top power broker.
It wasn't about subtle influence. It was about clear, calculated demands for power.
Okay, this brings us to 1933. Things are accelerating dramatically now, and Shirer takes us right to the Reichstag fire.
And he includes that absolutely chilling quote from Göring, supposedly overheard years later in 1942.
The one where he claims responsibility.
The only one who really knows about the Reichstag is I, because I set it on fire. Whether it's literally true or boastful, it's incredibly revealing.
Shirer doesn't seem to think van der Lubbe, the guy they caught, could have done it alone.
No, he calls him a dupe of the Nazis. Suggests he might have been encouraged to start a fire, but the scale of it. Shirer details the evidence from the trial.
The speed, the materials needed.
Exactly. The main hall engulfed in 2.5 minutes. Van der Lubbe only had his shirt for tinder. Experts testified it required significant amounts of chemicals, gasoline. Impossible for one man to carry and ignite in so many places so quickly.
So Shirer concludes it points clearly to Nazi involvement.
He does. And of course, the fire was immediately used as the pretext for emergency decrees, crushing civil liberties.
And then came the crucial vote on the Enabling Act. Right after.
Yes, the act that would give Hitler dictatorial powers. Shirer describes Hitler's furious reaction when the Social Democrats showed up late, but present, to vote against it.
What did he shout at them? Shirer quotes it.
You come late, but yet you come. You are no longer needed. The star of Germany will rise and yours will sink. Your death knell has sounded. I do not want your votes. Germany will be free, but not through you. Just pure venom.
But the Social Democrats held firm.
They did. Voted no. 84 brave votes against it, despite the threats.
But the Center Party, the Catholic Center Party, they voted yes.
That was the key, according to Shirer. Led by Monsignor Kaas, they voted yes 441 votes, even though Hitler hadn't given them the promised written guarantee about respecting the president's veto or constitutional rights.
So that vote basically handed him the power.
It legally dismantled German democracy, and Shirer describes the scene afterwards, Nazi deputies going wild, stormtroopers joining in, singing the horse whistle song. It was done.
Chilling. Now, another crucial element, the army. Shirer stresses Hitler knew he needed them, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't have come to power, couldn't stay in power without their support, or at least their tolerance. His survival depended on the army's backing, especially while Hindenburg was still alive as commander-in-chief.
And he believed only the traditional army could build the strong military he wanted.
Yes, the established officer corps, with its prestige, its organization, that was the tool he needed for rapid rearmament.
Which put him on a collision course with his own essay, the stormtroopers.
Exactly. Shirer describes the essay as a mob, useful for street fights, bringing him to power, but of little worth as a modern army. In Hitler's view, their purpose was served. They had to be sidelined.
And this led to the conflict with Rome, the essay leader.
Irreconcilable differences, Shirer calls them, and he notes Rome was perhaps the only person described as a truly close friend of Hitler's, but their views on the essay's future were fundamentally opposed.
Leading to a struggle to the death.
Literally. Shirer emphasizes it was a brutal power struggle between these two old comrades, again showing Hitler's willingness to eliminate anyone, even friends, who stood in the way of his strategic goals.
Okay, so power consolidated at home. Shirer then details Hitler starting to push internationally, leaving the Disarmament Conference and the League of Nations.
That was the first big move, yeah. The first of many crises over the next few years. And Shirer makes a really critical point here.
What about the Allies?
Yes. He argues they could have acted decisively then, applied sanctions not just for leaving the League, but for Versailles violations that Shirer says were already happening before Hitler took power.
He claims they could have overwhelmed Germany easily.
That's a strong assertion. Easily have overwhelmed Germany, ending the Third Reich in its birth year.
Why did they?
This is where Shirer talks about Hitler's genius, his uncanny understanding of his opponents. He knew the mettle of his foreign adversaries, their divisions, their hesitation, their blindness, their reluctance to risk war, and he knew his own people's desire to break free from Versailles.
His calculations were sound, Shirer says.
On both counts, yes. Because the Allies were, as Shirer puts it, too divided, too torpid, too blind to act effectively.
And Hitler solidified support at home for leaving the League with that plebiscite.
Timed perfectly, wasn't it? November 12, 1933, right after the anniversary of the hated 1918 armistice. He knew the German people would overwhelmingly approve ditching the League.
And internally, the state's control was tightening everywhere.
Yeah.
Shirer mentions churches.
Yeah, pressure on churches, even Protestant clergy, who initially supported him, strong-arm tactics to install a Nazi-friendly Reich Bishop Mueller.
Youth organization.
Relentless focus there. Hitler Youth becoming almost compulsory. Elite Nazi schools, Adolf Hitler schools, national political institutes set up to indoctrinate the next generation.
And labor. The labor front.
Shirer's scathing about that, calls it industrial serfdom, a gigantic fraud. Basically a propaganda and control tool, not a real representative body for workers at all.
Then back to foreign policy. Hitler's big peace speech in May 35.
Oh, yes. Shirer calls it perhaps the most eloquent and certainly one of the cleverest and most misleading speeches he ever gave.
Because he'd just scrapped the military parts of Versailles.
Exactly. But there he was, talking about tolerance, conciliation, how senseless war was, pure political theater.
Followed by the naval agreement offer to Britain.
A very shrewd move. Limiting the German Navy to 35% of Britain's. Not a new idea, Shirer notes he'd hinted at it before, but making it a public offer now.
With flattering words for Britain.
Oh, yes. No intention of naval rivalry, recognizing Britain's overpowering vital importance at sea. And the British government snapped it up.
The really bold move. Remilitarizing the Rhineland in 36.
Huge gamble, but it paid off massively. Dissolved the Reichstag, called an election and referendum, got those astronomical approval figures, 99% turnout, 98.8% approval.
Shirer notes the irregularities, though. Open voting, fear.
Definitely. The anecdote about the Zeppelin-Hindenburg vote count being higher than the number of people on board.
Right.
But even so, Shirer, who was there, says he had no doubt the approval was overwhelming. Why?
Because people loved seeing Versailles junked.
Yeah.
German soldiers back on German soil.
Exactly. Immensely popular move across the board in Germany.
Shirer then moves to the purges in early 38, getting rid of conservatives like Blomberg.
Neurath, shocked, yes. He calls February 4th, 1938, a major turning point. The Nazi Revolution basically complete at the top.
These were the guys meant to be a break on Hitler.
Supposedly. Appointed by Hindenburg or conservatives. But Shirer says they were no match for Hitler, lacked the moral strength, the political smarts to stand up to him.
So they just left.
Resigned, stepped aside, accepted dismissal. Shirer notes General Frisch, head of the army, was framed in gangster fashion on false charges, and 16 other top generals just meekly accepted being sacked.
Was there talk of the army resisting? A push.
Shirer mentions talk in the officer corps, but emphasizes it was only talk. He suggests Hitler's contempt for the traditional officers was justified. They'd accepted political murders before. They accepted this. Younger generals were eager for promotion anyway.
Which leads directly to the Austrian Anschluss in March 38. Shirer describes that meeting between Hitler and Schuschnigg, the Austrian chancellor,
where Hitler gave these vague assurances about respecting Austrian independence based on their 1936 agreement, but refused to give the specific guarantees Schuschnigg wanted. Very ominous.
And then events moved incredibly fast. Shirer details the denials from the Austrian president Miklas.
Yeah, Miklas denying he'd asked Schuschnigg to say certain things, denying he agreed to broadcasts requesting German help. His famous quote, "Things have not gone so far that we must capitulate." He refused to sign the Anschluss law, but basically had to surrender his functions.
And Seyss-Inquart, the Nazi installed in the Austrian government.
He announced his resignation to create the pretext of chaos, the need for intervention.
And Shirer includes that stunning instruction from Going about the telegram they needed Austria to send.
Just incredible cynicism. Göring telling Seyss-Inquart, he does not even have to send the telegram. All he needs to do is say, agree, just manufacture the consent.
And the invasion order, Operation Otto, was already written.
Marked top secret, Shirer quotes it. Demands not fulfilled, so to avoid further bloodshed, the entry of the German armed forces will commence at daybreak of March 12, issued before the fabricated crisis in Vienna was complete.
And Seyss-Inquart himself tried to stop it.
Right up until 2:10 a.m. on March 12th, Shirer says, Seyss-Inquart, the man supposedly inviting them, was trying to get Hitler to call off the invasion. It was happening regardless.
Yet Hitler publicly claimed they came as liberators, met by a stream of love.
In Königsberg, yes, using that supposed outpouring of support to justify not waiting for the plebiscite Schuschnigg had planned. A total contrast, Shirer shows, between the propaganda and the reality of the directive.
Classic pattern. Okay, that brings us to Czechoslovakia. The road to Munich, 1938, Shirer really digs into the British and French role here.
He does. Points to Chamberlain's off-the-record remarks back in June, encouraging that Times editorial suggesting self-determination for the Sudeten Germans, even secession via plebiscites.
So the British government was already leaning towards separation.
If it could be done peacefully, yes. Shirer states it clearly. And Hitler, of course, was pleased to hear this, saw a crack in their resolve.
Then that London meeting. Chamberlain, Daladier, Bonnet, but no Czechs.
Critically, no Czechs present. They agreed on a joint plan to basically force the Czechs, cede the Sudeten territories with over 50% German population.
In return for a guarantee of the new borders.
Yes, an international guarantee, which would replace their existing treaty with France, effectively abandoning their ally.
And when the Czechs initially rejected this?
Met with ill grace in London and Paris, Shirer writes. Immediate pressure back on Prague. Hold out, and you get zero help from us.
Benny's realized he was alone.
Utterly deserted. Shirer quotes the message delivered in the middle of the night. Fight Germany alone, or withdraw your rejection and accept the plan.
But Shirer reveals Hitler's actual goal wasn't just the Sudetenland.
No. According to a secret military directive Shirer cites, the objective was always to destroy Czechoslovakia by military action. The Anglo-French plan would destroy the state, sure, but not militarily. Hitler wanted that humiliation, that revenge on Benny's.
Which explains the drama at Godesberg when Chamberlain met Hitler again.
Exactly. Hitler upped the demands, made them harsher, but played semantic games, calling it just a memorandum, not a diktat.
And then news arrived that Czechoslovakia had mobilized.
And Hitler feigned outrage. Now, of course, the whole affair is settled. The Czechs will not dream of ceding any territory, pretending they were the obstacle.
And he gave Chamberlain that assurance. the last territorial demand.
Which Chamberlain apparently believed, Shirer notes. Hitler said it with great earnestness.
But Shirer includes that other quote from Hitler about treating Germans like niggers.
Chilling. On October 1st, I shall have Czechoslovakia where I want her. If France and England decide to strike, let them. I do not care a pfennig. Shows his utter contempt and real intentions.
And the final warning to the Czechs from Britain and France was devastating.
Basically, even if you fight and win, you lose the Sudetenland anyway because we've agreed to it, so why start a war? Utter betrayal.
Moving forward slightly, November 38, Kristallnacht. Shirer describes the global shock.
Which, paradoxically, enraged Hitler. He saw the world reaction as proof of that Jewish world conspiracy against him.
Shirer sees it as a turning point. Hitler losing control.
A portend, yeah. Megalomania getting the upper hand. And he cites the Goering meeting record showing Hitler approved it, pushed for eliminating Jews from economic life. Less restraint from then on.
Then the final act for Czechoslovakia. The creation of Slovakia in March 39.
Manufactured under German pressure, as Shirer details. British diplomats told London how it happened, but Chamberlain quickly used the secession as his excuse.
Excuse not to honor the guarantee given after Munich.
Precisely. The guarantee of the remaining Czech state became meaningless.
And President Hoxha was pressured into that meeting with Hitler.
Giving Hitler the opportunity for the final brazen act, as Shirer calls it.
March 15th, German troops marched into Bohemia and Moravia. No resistance.
And Hitler's triumphant entry into Prague, sleeping in Hradčin Castle. Shirer frames it as Hitler finally getting the revenge he felt cheated of at Munich, settling old scores from Vienna against Venice.
Okay, this final section of Shirer's account really lays out the last steps to war. Focus shifts to Poland, that meeting between Polish Foreign Minister Beck and Hitler.
And Ribbentrop, yeah. Beck came away deeply pessimistic, saw no possibility whatever of agreement on Danzig and the corridor.
Even though Beck himself wasn't exactly anti-Nazi.
Not at all. Shirer points out Beck was violently anti-Russian, disliked the French, had sympathy for the Nazi dictatorship, and had actually worked to bring Poland closer to Germany.
But Hitler's demands were too much.
Yeah.
Then, March 31st, Chamberlain's declaration.
The historic declaration, Shirer calls it. Britain and France would support Poland if attacked and if Poland resisted.
A sudden change after all the previous inaction.
And Shirer is sharp here. Contrasts it with the Rhineland, Austria, Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
All missed opportunities to stop Hitler earlier at little cost. He argues Chamberlain risked everything to help Hitler appease destroyed democratic Czechoslovakia.
And missed the chance to work with the Soviet Union.
Shirer suggests that alliance might have deterred Hitler or ensured a quick defeat, but the opportunity was squandered.
Then the meeting with Ciano, the Italian foreign minister. Hitler still thought the West would back down.
He did, convinced they'd recoil from war. Ciano was doubtful, though. Outlined Italy's military weakness, wanted to postpone war, even mentioned needing to prepare for a 1942 exhibition.
Mussolini wanted talks, but Hitler said no.
Flatly rejected it, and then that German double-cross Shirer describes.
A false communique.
Yeah.
Claiming full agreement with Italy.
Yeah, Ribbentrop issued it right after Ciano left, despite agreeing not to, deliberately binding Italy. Shirer notes the Italian ambassador at Tolico was furious, called it Machiavellian, and even tipped off the British that war was imminent.
Meanwhile, the Nazi-Soviet pact talks were heating up. Ribbentrop's offered a Molotov.
Basically offering to divide Eastern Europe. No question between the Baltic Sea and the Black Sea which cannot be settled, proposing to clarify territorial questions. Baltic states, Poland, Southeast Europe, direct bait for Moscow.
Shirer describes the tension in Berlin, waiting for Moscow's reply.
Huge tension. Urgency to deploy forces by September 1st. Soviets stalling on a trade deal for political reasons. Then a task denial, interpreted as a signal a political deal was still possible.
Did Shirer think the Soviets were negotiating seriously with the Allies too?
He notes the uncertainty, lack of Russian documents at the time he wrote. Allies initially thought they were serious, shared secret military data. Molotov got the Nazi proposal August 15th, hinted at a non-aggression pact. Shirer thinks Stalin made the final decision around August 19th.
And his conclusion on Anglo-French diplomacy.
Complete bankruptcy. Repeated retreats, lost the Soviet opportunity. Game over, basically.
Final days. Hitler still determined to smash Poland, but tries one last time to keep Britain out.
Yes. Ambassador Henderson met him, found him absolutely calm and normal, speaking with great earnestness. Shirer points out Henderson still couldn't see through the act.
And Hitler made that incredible offer to guarantee the British Empire.
Breathtakingly cynical, offered to pledge Germany's power to defend the British Empire if they stayed out.
But then, bad news from Rome. Mussolini got cold feet.
Sent that letter outlining Italy's total unpreparedness for war. Shirer describes Hitler waiting with unconcealed impatience, then dismissing the Italian ambassador Attilico with scant courtesy when the bad news arrived.
How did Hitler react to the final British guarantee to Poland? Holder's diary.
On August 25th, Führer considerably shaken, but the next day, Führer very calm and clear. Attack orders ready for September 1st. Now just trying to eliminate British intervention if possible, but going ahead anyway.
And those last-ditch efforts via the Swede, Delaris.
Shuttling messages, Shirer details the British reply. Desire for understanding, obligation to Poland, peaceful settlement needed.
Delaris maybe embellished things, but pressure on the Polish ambassador.
Shirer suggests so, and relayed the British points. Rejecting the empire guarantee, rejecting colony talks, proposing a 5-power guarantee for Poland, suggesting negotiations over the corridor.
Then that final futile meeting between the Polish ambassador Lipski and Ribbentrop.
Lipski, exhausted but dignified, just read a formal note. A brief, sterile meeting. Ended with an argument about whether Ribbentrop had read proposals clearly before. What difference did it make now, Shirer asks.
August 31st. The atmosphere Shirer describes.
Eerie. Everyone seemed to be going around in a daze. Some Germans still hoping the Poles would cave like the others, but Shirer says war was inevitable unless one side completely capitulated.
Then the British and French ultimatum on September 3rd.
Shirer quotes it. Suspend aggression, withdraw forces, or Britain will without hesitation fulfill their obligation.
And Ribbentrop's reply.
Repeated the somewhat stale lie about Polish aggression. Claimed Germany wasn't the aggressor. Henderson noted he was strangely courteous and polite, delivering the no.
Shirer also includes that point about Allied military weakness. Gamelin's admission.
Yeah, the French commander admitting he hesitated to reveal French weaknesses even to his own government. Said France couldn't hope for victory except in a long war, maybe 2 years minimum. Couldn't launch a major offensive until 41 or 42.
Grim assessment. Shirer then touches on the Nazi-Soviet talks after the invasion began.
Dividing the spoils. Stalin, taking personal charge, deciding no independent Poland should remain, proposed giving Warsaw Province to Germany in return for Germany giving up its claim on Lithuania.
And the Athenia sinking. The passenger liner.
Torpedoed September 3rd without warning, 112 dead, 28 Americans. Germany denied it, claimed no U-boats were near. Shirer notes strict orders had been given to follow the rule, so it was embarrassing. The internal decision, don't investigate until the submarines return home. Finally, Shirer discusses the Zosin conspiracy, the military plotters.
They failed to stop the Polish invasion, then tried to stop the war spreading west.
That was the focus. But Shirer argues that while the army had the means after mobilization, its increased size, full of Nazi sympathizers, made it hard. Halder himself admitted difficulty finding troops willing to move against Hitler.
And Hitler's confrontation with Brockich, the army CNC.
Furious. November 5th, 1939. Hitler insisting on the attack in the west, accusing the army of not wanting to fight. Brockich left totally shaken.
And the plot just fizzled.
Completely. Hitler stuck to his attack date. The conspirators had the written order they supposedly needed, but panicked, burned papers. Oster warned the Belgians and Dutch, but Shirer concludes the generals knew they were beaten. The former corporal had once again triumphed over them.
A powerful, dispiriting account of that internal failure.
And alongside all this political and military stuff, Shirer's work, especially later sections, chillingly details the horrific regime policies unfolding. He discusses POWs.
Using them for forced labor was a violation, but Shirer says that was the least of their worries.
Survival was the main thing, especially for Russian POWs. The odds were terrible. Shirer gives the figures. 5.7 million captured, barely 1 million alive in 45.
2 million died just from starvation, exposure, disease.
Yes. Another million, unaccounted for Shirer, suggests likely exterminated by the SD. German records admitted 67,000 executed, but he says that's certainly a partial figure.
Hostage-taking, too, used on a massive scale.
Ancient practice, but the scale and the ratios. 100 hostages shot for every German killed. Shirer mentions dozens of secret orders from figures like Keitel, Stulpnagel.
Specifying prominent people.
Keitel include well-known leading personalities or members of their families. Stulpnagel, better known the hostages, greater will be the deterrent effect. Utterly cold-blooded.
The extermination camps?
Yeah.
Auschwitz? The selections on the ramp.
2 SS doctors making spot decisions. Fit for work to the camp, unfit immediately to the extermination plants. Children, Shirer notes, invariably exterminated as unable to work.
The description of the gas chambers is just horrific.
Pouring the Zyklon B crystals. Sergeant Moll's alleged comment, Nu geben Ihnen suppression. Watching through portholes. The panic. The bodies piling up at the door. Shirer doesn't shy away from the gruesome details documented later. He also touches on the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, Stroop's report.
Claiming low German losses, likely doctored.
Shirer suggests so, not wanting to upset Himmler, and Stroop's conclusion about his troops being exemplary models of soldiers, Chilling doesn't cover it.
The numbers killed in the final solution. Shirer mentions the different estimates.
Yeah, acknowledges the debate. Eichmann and SS witnesses, 5 to 6 million. Nuremberg Indictment World Jewish Congress, 5.7 million. Reitlinger's study, maybe 4.2 to 4.6 million. Huge numbers regardless. And finally, the medical experiments.
Jacko. High-altitude freezing tests.
Shirer notes the research finished in May 42 and points out that figures like Milch and Goering actually sent official thanks to Himmler for Dr. Rascher's experiments.
And the Luftwaffe even requested more freezing experiments.
Yeah, Dr. Hübke, medical inspector, tendered obedient gratitude, but noted an omission on extreme cold research, leading the Luftwaffe to build a special chamber for more freezing tests.
It shows the systematic cruelty was there from early on, even if the full scale unfolded later.
Exactly. Rooted in policies and directives present long before the war's end.
Wow. Okay, that was intense. A heavy but incredibly detailed look, drawing straight from Shirer's work at how the Third Reich began and operated in those early years. We've seen those surprising details of Hitler's youth, his early political cunning, the internal party fights.
The murky financing.
Right, the financing, and that step-by-step dismantling of opposition, both at home and then internationally.
And really, we focused on the origins and the path to war, but the excerpts clearly show how quickly power was consolidated, how ruthlessly opportunities, often created by others' failures, were leveraged, and how horrifyingly the policies of extreme violence and control started, from those cynical hostage ratios right through to the planning for industrial-scale extermination.
It really makes you think about how Shirer connects it all. Personal flaws, specific political calculations, that uncanny understanding of opponents, and just, well, external factors all combining.
To create something devastatingly effective, at least in gaining power, we saw everything from his weird personal life and those financial dealings to the cold analysis of political failures and the strategic, often outright deceptive manipulation of world leaders.
Absolutely. Shirer gives those concrete examples, that indictment from Drexler, his own party founder, the Reichstag fire manipulation, the Enabling Act vote.
The way he just dismantled Austria and Czechoslovakia piece by piece.
And those disturbing early glimpses of the atrocities to come.
It definitely leaves you thinking about those pivot points Shirer identifies, those moments the Allies could have acted, maybe, when Germany was still weaker.
Or those internal military plots that just never happened. So frustrating to read about.
It is. And maybe this raises a question for you, the listener, thinking about all these specific details from Shirer's viewpoint. How does understanding these particular, often overlooked aspects of the regime's origins and early methods, how does that change the way you think about how such immense destructive power could actually be accumulated and wielded?
Definitely something to chew on. Thanks for diving deep into this complex history with us today. We hope this look into Shirer's account has given you some new insights and maybe sparked some curiosity for further exploration into this absolutely critical period.